Sometimes life throws up situations that you can't even believe are happening to you. I thought I had an ordinary family. Wife, adult daughter, stable job. We lived quietly, without scandals, without drama. Yes, there were difficult moments, like everyone else. But I could never have imagined that one mistake, one accidental decision would destroy everything that I had been building for years. I don't know if I should share this anymore, but maybe it will help someone not to repeat my mistakes. This story began as an ordinary family episode. No suspicions, no hints, just a routine. It was only later that I realized that imperceptibly we began to move away from each other. And then it seemed that it was something temporary, just fatigue or everyday trifles. And then everything collapsed in one moment. And I realized that sometimes the scariest thing is not that you don't know the truth, but that you find out too late. I've always considered our family to be strong. We've been together for over 20 years. Behind his back, joint trips, family holidays, evenings in the kitchen for conversations, and even the usual quarrels. All this seemed to be the norm, a part of life. My wife always knew how to keep up a conversation, how to cheer up and find the right words. She often worked late, but I understood that times were like this. Everyone was trying to hold on to their jobs. My daughter grew up quiet and responsible. Studies, clubs, rare meetings with friends. We were always on the same page, and I could talk to her about almost anything. Of course, there were the usual everyday trivia. Who doesn't face it? Somewhere I didn't have time to meet my wife, somewhere I didn't find time to chat with my daughter, but I always thought it was fixable. Family comfort, their own traditions. It seemed that this was the solid foundation on which real happiness was built. I never imagined that this familiar, comfortable world would one day simply disappear. It didn't happen all at once. At first, it was just little things. Unanswered calls, short replies, awkward silences at dinner. My wife started coming home later and later from work. When I asked if everything was okay, she always said she was just tired or busy. I wanted to believe her, but something in her eyes told a different story. There was a distance between us, something invisible, but I could feel it. The conversations grew colder, our laughter together became rare. I thought it was just a rough patch, maybe stress, maybe just the routine of life weighing us down. I blamed myself. Maybe I worked too much, didn't pay enough attention at home, maybe I was taking everything for granted. Sometimes at night, I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering where our warmth had gone. Was it just me, or was something else happening that I didn't want to see? I tried to shake it off, convincing myself that every family has ups and downs, but in my heart, doubts started to grow. She came to me one evening, quieter than usual, eyes red like she'd been holding back tears all day. She said everything was fine at first, but her voice shook, and the silence between her words felt heavier than anything she could have confessed. We sat in the living room, lights dim, and I told her she could tell me anything. No judgment, no pressure, just the truth. She started talking about feeling lost lately. Bad dates, shallow connections, people who wanted attention but not responsibility. She said she was tired of pretending everything was okay. Tired of saying I'm fine when she was anything but. I just listened, realizing how long it had been since we truly talked like this, without phones, without distractions, just father and daughter. By the end, she leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I just want to feel safe again." I promised her that whatever it is, we'll handle it together, no matter how hard, no matter the cost. It started to feel like she was living a separate life under the same roof. Late returns, rushed showers, her phone always face down, new passwords where there had never been any. When I asked if everything was okay at work, she smiled, but the smile never reached her eyes. Sometimes she would step out to take a call and return 15 minutes later, distant, distracted, apologizing without saying why. The small rituals we shared, a quick breakfast together, checking in by text, began to disappear, replaced by excuses and silence. I told myself not to overthink, but every unanswered message left a mark that didn't fade. At night, she slept turned away from me, as if a wall had grown between us that neither of us wanted to name. And I kept wondering whether I was losing her, or if I'd already lost her and just didn't know it yet. The truth didn't shout, it whispered through small inconsistencies. A ride-hailing receipt that didn't match the office address. A late-night call from an unknown number saved under a woman's name. A stray detail in a story told twice, the second time with different weather, different timing. I wasn't looking to catch her, I wanted to believe her. But the puzzle pieces kept forming a picture I didn't want to see. One evening, when her phone buzzed on the table while she was in the shower, I hesitated, and then I looked. It was a short message, nothing explicit, but the tone was unmistakable. Intimacy pretending to be casual. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I put the phone back exactly as it was. When she came out, I couldn't meet her eyes. Something had ended in that moment, and I didn't yet know how to bury it. The evening started as usual, but the air seemed heavier than usual, as if the walls knew in advance what would happen next. I asked bluntly, without trying to pretend that it was nothing, "Where have you been? Why it's late again? Why all the stories don't add up?" At first, she was cool and confident, as if she had been preparing for this conversation in advance. But then her voice faltered and the mask cracked. She said it was a mistake, once, a stupidity that she herself couldn't live with, and that she wanted to stop everything, but she didn't know how to admit it. At that moment, the silence was deafening. She was talking, and there was only one question in my head. When exactly did we lose each other? I didn't scream. I didn't have the strength. It felt like something was slowly breaking inside, without a sound, but irrevocably. I wanted to believe in chance, that it wasn't about us, not about our lives, but the facts were too smooth. She asked not to destroy the family, said that she realized everything, that it meant nothing, that she was ashamed and that she was ready to fix everything. But how to fix what has already happened? There are things that cannot be turned back. You can only learn to live with their shadow. We sat in silence for a long time. She had her eyes downcast, and I had my hands clenched painfully. I said that I needed a break, that I couldn't make a decision in a hurry. She nodded, but it was clear from the look in her eyes that she understood how thin the line was. Inside, pity, anger, fatigue, and emptiness were mixed. And somewhere in between, I caught myself thinking that what I'm most afraid of is not the betrayal itself, but the fact that this confession is not the beginning of healing, but the end of a familiar life. We decided to step back, not because it solved anything, but because the air in the house had become unbreathable. She stayed with a friend for a few days, and I told myself it was just space, just time to think. But the silence quickly turned into an echo chamber, where every doubt got louder. I stopped checking her last scene. I stopped rehearsing speeches in my head. Instead, I just sat with the weight of it, realizing how fragile everything had been long before the truth surfaced. Our daughter tried to keep things normal, small talk over breakfast, a quick joke before leaving the house, but even her laughter sounded careful, like walking on glass. Nights were the worst. The bed was too big, the rooms too quiet, and every familiar object looked like a prop from a life that didn't belong to me anymore. I told myself the pause would bring clarity. It brought honesty instead, the kind that hurts and heals in unequal doses. At first, it was subtle. She spoke less, moved quickly from room to room, avoided eye contact when I asked how her day was. Then came the closed door, the long showers, the canceled plans with friends she used to trust with everything. She said she was tired. She said she was busy. But her hands shook when she texted, and her smile never reached her eyes.
I wanted to press, to demand the truth, but I remembered what pressure feels like when you're already breaking. So I cooked her dinner and waited. I left her a note and waited. I sat outside her room and waited, learning the patience of a parent who knows the confession has to come from the inside. Some nights, I heard her crying quietly, the kind of cry that's meant to be hidden, and I realized that whatever had broken us was spilling into her life too.
She finally came to me on a Sunday afternoon, eyes swollen, voice raw from holding everything in. She said she'd met someone. It was supposed to be nothing, just a night to feel wanted, to forget the noise at home. Then she said the words that cracked whatever was left of my composure. She'd tested positive for an STI. Time slowed. Not because of the diagnosis alone, but because I could feel the web of consequences tightening around us all. I told her we'd handle it. Doctor, treatment, privacy, whatever it takes. I kept my voice steady for her sake. Inside, a different storm raged. Fear, guilt, and a sharp, irrational anger at an unmaimed face I hadn't met yet.
She described him in fragments. His jacket that smelled like cologne and rain, the way he spoke softly but always looked past her, the car he drove, the bar they met at. Each detail hit like a slow-moving train, familiar and undeniable. The neighborhood I'd heard about before, the timeline that overlapped with work late, the same vague first name tossed around like a harmless coincidence. I didn't want to connect the dots, but they connected themselves, cleanly, mercilessly, until the outline of a single man stood where two separate stories used to be. I asked one careful question, then another and another, never saying the name, never accusing, just confirming. Her face changed when she realized I already knew more than I was saying, that I was no longer searching, only acknowledging what had already been found. In that moment, the shock wasn't loud. It was quiet, a stillness that said, "This isn't random. This is the same man."
Anger would have been easier. Instead, there was a clean fracture inside, like glass cracked perfectly down the middle. Every memory tried to renegotiate its meaning. Laughs we shared, plans we made, the ordinary mornings that suddenly felt like props for a script I didn't write. It wasn't just betrayal, it was displacement. My life still looked like mine, but it no longer fit. I walked through rooms like a guest, touching familiar things to remind myself they were real. Guilt crept in where it had no right to be. Guilt for not seeing sooner, for not protecting her, for letting silence become our common language. The hardest part wasn't pain. It was the certainty that nothing said next could put the world back where it stood yesterday.
I told her what our daughter had said, and for a second, she didn't breathe. She reached for explanations. She didn't know. It was a coincidence. It couldn't be the same person. But the words dissolved as soon as they formed. Her hands trembled as if the truth were a physical weight, and for once, she had nothing left to hide behind. There was a strange, exhausted compassion in the room. None of us the villains we wanted each other to be. All of us trapped by what had already happened. She apologized without asking for forgiveness, and I listened without offering absolution. Some endings don't slam shut. They close like a door that's been off its hinges for years, slow, inevitable, and final. The words finally broke free in the living room that evening, like a dam giving way after too many cracks. Our daughter looked between us with eyes that held too much for someone her age. Hurt, confusion, a quiet accusation that needed no voice. She turned to her mother first, voice trembling. "How could you? And then it was the same person?" The air thickened with unspoken questions, and my wife's face crumpled, her denials turning into sobs that filled the space between us. I stayed silent at first, letting the storm rage. But then it spilled out. My anger at the lies, the chain of pain that started with one choice and ended with all of us broken. She fired back, not at me, but at the unfairness of it all. How one mistake snowballed into this nightmare. How she never meant for it to touch our daughter. Voices rose, tears fell, and for the first time, no one was pretending. It was raw, ugly, necessary. The kind of confrontation that strips away the illusions, but leaves you wondering if anything can be salvaged. In the end, we all sat exhausted, the fight draining out like air from a punctured tire. No winners, just three people staring at the wreckage, realizing the family we knew was gone, and what came next would have to be built from the pieces, if we could find the will. Treatments started quietly, a clinic visit, prescriptions tucked away, follow-ups that felt like secret appointments in a life that no longer felt ours. Our daughter withdrew into herself, her once bright energy dimmed by shame she didn't deserve to carry. She skipped classes, stared at walls, and I watched helplessly as the infection's shadow lingered longer than the medicine could touch. My wife and I coexisted like strangers in the house, polite nods over coffee, avoiding bedrooms, the intimacy we once had replaced by a cold, functional routine that mocked what we'd lost. Money became another fracture. Bills piled up for therapy sessions neither wanted but both needed. The cost of privacy in a small town where whispers traveled fast. I throw myself into work to escape, but the guilt followed. Guilt for not protecting them, for the family dinners that now tasted like ash. The real toll wasn't the logistics, it was the slow erosion of trust, where every glance carried a question. Can we ever feel safe again? It wasn't dramatic, no slammed doors or final ultimatums, just a quiet conversation over lukewarm tea, where I said the words I'd rehearsed in silence for weeks. I can't stay. Not like this. Not after everything. She nodded, eyes distant, as if she'd known it was coming, the fight in her long since spent. Packing felt surreal, folding clothes into boxes, glancing at photos I'd leave behind, the house echoing with absences that no longer needed explaining. I took our daughter with me, not out of spite, but because she needed stability, and in that moment, I was the one who could provide it, flawed as I was. Driving away, the rearview mirror showed a life shrinking smaller, and for the first time in months, there was a sliver of relief amid the grief. Honesty had its price, but staying in the lie would have cost us everything, our chance at something real, even if it started broken. The call started soon after. First from her, then from bill collectors echoing her pleas. Treatment costs, rent splits, the life we'd built now divided like property in a will. Our daughter looked to me with wide eyes, whispering about clinic fees she couldn't cover, her voice cracking on words like help that once came easy. I wanted to fix it, to wave a check and make the pain disappear, but the betrayal had drained that impulse. Every dollar felt like enabling the mess we were in. She demanded her share, not out of greed but desperation, her voice sharp over the phone. "We're still a family, aren't we? Or does this mean nothing?" I explained as gently as I could, that emotionally I was bankrupt, that paying her bills now would tie me to a past I needed to escape. It wasn't cruelty, it was survival. Boundaries drawn in ink and silence, leaving us all a little more alone. Looking back, this wasn't just a story of betrayal. It was a map of how one hidden choice can unravel lives, leaving threads that tangle everyone in reach. We've started over separately, me and my daughter in a smaller place, rebuilding with therapy and time. My wife finding her own path, the distance of mercy we didn't ask for. Trust isn't gone forever, but it's cautious now, earned in small acts rather than assumed in vows. The real lesson? Lies don't stay small. They grow roots in silence, and pulling them out hurts everyone. If there's hope, it's in the honesty we've learned, to speak sooner, listen harder, and choose integrity over comfort. Life moves on, scarred but not defined by the break, proof that even shattered families can find their way to something whole again.